Hey everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and this week we're talking about individuality in recovery. It's important to remember as you begin your recovery process, even if it's not such a black or white thing, like maybe it doesn't feel like the day you're beginning recovery, maybe it does, and maybe it's a kind of a wavering thing. All of that is okay. It's important to remember at any point that you switch into recovery mindset, even if not all of you is there, it's important to remember that from that moment onward, you are forming your very own story. In fact, that story is already a continuation of your journey, but it doesn't ever stray from being your very, very, very own. And the only difference between the two parts of the story is that when you enter your recovery, you are getting your power back. You are reclaiming yourself. So that's the part of the story that is all about empowerment and all about bravery and all about life. And but it's all yours. You know, your whole life is your very own story, so nobody could ever have the same sort of history as you, or nobody ever could ever have the same exact incentives for the same exact reasons for developing an eating disorder, or the same exact incentives for recovering. You get to claim that. Um, and you get to not only, I mean, you can claim you can take pride in what it is that you rose above, and the part of the eating disorder where you're you're not yet in recovery, you're not yet necessarily going toward that place. You can recognize in that place, you can recognize in the struggle that the reason you are experiencing a struggle is very deep and probably very profound, and there's probably a lot of pain that goes along with it. So that's your story, and that's the story that you get to pride yourself on having gotten through. And it's not as though, I know you develop an eating disorder because you haven't necessarily come to terms with pain, or you need a way to cope with pain, but it doesn't take away the fact that you were dealt a certain hand and needed to somehow be the person you are, and be the brave person that you are, and fight in order to just survive. And I know this can come along, this can present itself in a variety of ways. It might not be that intense, it might not be that dramatic, and that's okay if it's not. That's the thing about comparing yourself and comparing your stories. Every single reason, first of all, that you develop an eating disorder is completely valid. There is no such thing as like, if you say, oh well, nothing happened to me, so I don't know why I have this, and therefore, I'm not as deserving of recovery. There's no such thing as no good enough reason to be struggling. There's no such thing as an invalid reason to be struggling. Every single thing that led you to be struggling um, is absolutely relevant, and it's all relative to your experience and to your life and your upbringing, and so it all makes sense. That's something to keep in mind, that every single thing that's happening to you makes sense because it's your life. It's within the context of your life. So you should never feel, and this is something that I've done, never put yourself down, or don't invalidate the fact that you are struggling. Allow that to present itself to you. Allow yourself to acknowledge that you're struggling for very understandable reasons, and those reasons belong to you and no one else, and nobody has the power to knock them down, or to say, oh, well, that's all that happened to you, why do you have an eating disorder? Doesn't add up. Nobody has the power to say that, and it doesn't even matter if it honestly doesn't matter. Even if you have no traceable reason or reference as to why you might have developed an eating disorder, it is so completely, that's okay, because that's still you're still carving out your place in figuring out what it is about you that led you to this place of somehow feeling like you needed to rely on an eating disorder to whatever. It's all completely valid. And the other thing is that when you say, this is my story, I'm not going to compare myself, I'm not going to say I don't deserve this or that. What that allows you to do is be fully honest. And if you can go to, say, a therapist and really present that and say, I don't understand why I developed an eating disorder. I don't feel like anything ever happened, or that I ever experienced anything that just seems to add up to my having an eating disorder. That gives you an incredible platform from which to really figure it out, because sure, there's a reason. And perhaps, just to throw it out there, maybe you minimized something that you experienced. Maybe it just never even occurred to you to connect two things. But saying this is what I'm struggling with, this is my journey, and saying I don't know, without shame. I don't know what led me here, but without the shame and without the guilt and without well, that person has it so much worse. Getting rid of all that, that doesn't serve you, and it's so harmful, and there's no need for it. Because you know what? That person who's supposedly been through so much worse than you would probably say to you that your journey matters. They're not going to say about you the things that you're saying about you. So if you're comparing, try and remember that the person you're comparing yourself to is not going to discredit you in the way you discredit yourself. So remember that. Allow it to just let you be honest when you're talking about your struggle, when you're trying to figure out your way. And remember, no two people's histories are alike, no two people's struggles in the eating disorder are alike, and then no two people's recoveries are alike. And that's what makes you, like we said last week, that's, recovery is about carving out yourself. The way that you deal with recovery, the way that you approach recovery it gives you a chance to highlight who you really are, and nobody else can be that person. So you're just creating yourself, you're building yourself, you're identifying your strengths every step of the way in recovery. That's what you're doing. You don't want those ways, those methods, those certain very specific characteristics that belong to you. You don't want them to be identical with someone else. It's great if you can identify with people. That's wonderful. Recovery should be about connecting with people. Well, it would be great. For me, it's enhanced recovery a lot in being able to connect with people and being able to, in general, but also people who are also trying to recover, also people who have recovered. Connection is a big thing. Identification is a big thing, to be able to say, I'm not alone. But to the point where you can feel like you're safe, you're not alone, and you're not judging yourself for what you've been through or what you're going through. And you're able to form meaningful bonds. That's the whole point of that. Not to say, this person is now farther along, so I should be farther along. Or, don't get caught up in thinking that because I have a lot in common with this person, something is wrong with me if I'm not where they're at. I must be defective. Something is wrong. I'm not good enough. Or, don't take somebody and, so much of what we do, I think, well, so much of what I've done in my life has been idealize people. So, that's a lot of the competition, or that's just a lot of the insecurity, not even for me so much the competition, but the insecurity, the less than feeling. So, of course, that was a part of what made me develop an eating disorder, or what led to that, and what kept me there. So, try to keep that in mind. If you're idealizing someone, it's more of a symptom than a rational way of thinking, and it would help to let that go and recognize that, what the person that you're idealizing has had their ups and downs, and even if you see them at a really good place, chances are they've had a lot of ups and downs in order to get to that place, and you're just not seeing them there. I mean, and early on in my recovery, when I would look at people who are recovered, when I would listen to people, watch people's videos on YouTube, I would get a little, and I would feel a little envious, because look at how great they're doing, and look at how much they're living life and participating in life, and just they're free of the eating disorder. But the reason they made videos is because they recovered, because they're well in recovery, which automatically means that at one point they were not this way, and they have come from that. So I've had to tell myself that, that, I am seeing them in a really good place, and they're being role models for that, and they're saying, you can also be in a good place, and, I was once not in a good place, and now I am. And that's the whole point. The whole point is not, just because I've never seen them in a bad place, I need to take on faith that they have been, just by virtue of the fact that they are now out there advocating for recovery. I want to believe that they're coming from an authentic place, and I trust that. So I have to give myself the same kind of credit. I've had to give myself at times, the same sort of, like, I'm, in a bad place, not less than. I see the continuum. I see how it's possible that it is possible to be in a better place. And, I'm, not going to get caught up in, I realize I'm only seeing a part of this person's life. There's a whole other part that I'm not seeing. So, I've had to tell myself that. And, it hasn't been, comparing myself in general in life has always been a problem before, well before the eating disorder. So the comparisons, I will say, in the past year and a half or so, have gotten worlds better, and to the point where they're very, very slight these days. And I'm not talking about recovery, I'm talking about just in general, like having that as something that I struggle with, comparing myself to other people. It's gotten so small, and that's because recovery has allowed me to just see the good in people without attaching myself to it. Like, see it, respect it, admire it, observe it, adore it, love it, without saying, well, because they're that way, that means I'm not. So I'm flipping it and saying, oh, I don't have that, but they do. It's not like that. And being in recovery and being recovered has allowed me to simply take that in and mold it into my own way of expressing it and give back. So that's like the authentic type of communication that I can have with people now as a result of recovery, and not base everything on comparing. I have the ability finally in my life to respect and admire people with no strings attached, and hopefully garner a similar type of I don't know what you want to call it, but if I'm giving out something positive, I wouldn't ever want somebody to see that and then turn it on themselves and flip it on themselves somehow and say, I'm not that. So I practiced that. I practiced non-judgmental positivity, and non-comparing growth and recovery and strength. I don't know if that made any sense, but I hope it did. Okay, have a great week. Be yourself. Know yourself. Be proud of who you are, where you've come from, how hard you've worked, and you deserve every bit of that pride in yourself. Okay, bye.